This is the Atomstack X40 Max, a professional-grade laser engraving and cutting machine. In this review, we'll be taking a look at the Atomstack X40 Max, its specs and features, and putting its engraving and cutting abilities to the test in a wide range of materials. So let's get started! Welcome back to Space Age Tech, where we look at the tech that pushes the limits. We'll start by unboxing the unit. Like most laser engravers we have seen so far, it comes in this not very fancy box on the outside, but it's very well laid out and cushioned on the inside. The first thing we'll see is this metal mat board, which protects our working surface. This massive machine has a work area of 800 millimeters by 400 millimeters, which combined with a max speed of 30,000 millimeters per minute makes it ideal for very large jobs and volume production. Here we also see our trusty product manual. It has our assembly instructions, so we'll definitely need this later. Let's take a first look at our integrated air assist. This helps us get cleaner cuts and avoid scorching. The air assist can be automatically controlled by our Lightburn software, which allows it to run only when it's necessary, unlike standalone air assists, which run all the time whether the machine is running or not. This is our 48-watt laser module. You can observe here the power output switch, which we'll be using for our engraving and cutting modes. You'll also notice we have a laser filtering window to help protect your eyes. This can filter up to 97% of ultraviolet light, but we do always recommend that you don't rely on this as your only source of protection and wear your goggles whenever possible. Here we have our USB connector cable. We'll use this cable to connect our laptop or PC. We also have a USB card and card reader and nuts and bolts and our wood chips for testing. This is our power cable and power adapter. Although this machine has a total wattage of 240 watts, which is the power that the machine takes to run, the maximum optical output wattage for this machine is 48 watts. As always, safety first. Here are our safety goggles included in the package. You should always wear these when the machine is in operation. Now we're getting to the fun stuff. Our frame, our Z-axis rail, and frame hardware. This machine does require assembly. We won't be doing an assembly section because Atomstack already has resources on this on their website, including instructional videos. Here is our 3.5-inch LCD screen controller. You can also see the cable drag chain. This chain allows the wire harness to run smoothly without tangling and improves the wire life. This is Atomstack's attempt at managing cables for this large machine. And here is our fully assembled machine. On the bottom left, you'll notice this big red button. It's very important to note that this is an emergency stop button. If there's an accident, you can stop the machine at any time. We also have a reset switch and limit switch to make the engraving process safer. We do recommend that you always keep an eye on your machine. Accidents can happen at any moment, so it's good to be vigilant and prepared. We're almost done setting up, but first, let's take a look at some of the optional components. These are sold separately or as part of an upgraded package. This is the Atomstack R1 Pro multi-function chuck and roller rotary for laser engravers. This multi-mode chuck and roller rotary can be used to engrave cylindrical items such as cups, mugs, rings, and also other irregular items. It's made of aluminum alloy and it's mostly assembled. It just needs to be attached to our X40 Max. In today's video, we won't demonstrate the rotary tool in action. If you would like a separate review for this tool, please let us know in the comments. On the bottom, you can see our rotary tool. This is what we would use to engrave things like cups or mugs. The chuck, which is right above that, can be used to engrave irregular items, most commonly jewelry. Once these tools are connected, we would align our laser to the engraving area. The chuck or rotary tool would then turn the item to achieve engraving on a non-flat surface. We also have our honeycomb working panel for laser engraver machines. First things first, here's our instruction manual. This honeycomb panel helps improve the exhaust of smoke and heat more efficiently while the machine is in use. This honeycomb is 450 by 450 by 25 millimeters. Because our X40 Max is quite large, we would actually need 2 of these to cover the whole work area. Here's our metal mat board. This protects our working surface, so we'll put it on top of our work area or workbench. And finally, we have this soft enclosure. This is the Atomstack FB2 Plus. This is a foldable enclosure cover for all brands of laser engravers, and it has an extension kit to fit our X40 Max. This large enclosure features 900D high-density flame retardant, Oxford cloth, and has a large capacity enough to fit our X40 Max. It is 1,170 millimeters by 730 millimeters by 310 millimeters, or 46 inches by 28.7 inches by 12.2 inches. This enclosure is not necessarily for the X40. It is a universal cover and can be used with other brands as well. We are happy that we don't have to build something custom this large. So let's see it come together. Here's our full setup with our X40 Max, our rotary tool and chuck, and our enclosure. You can see how it all fits together with the enclosure. So let's get ready to test. Let's start with 1/4 inch MDF. We'll do a cutting and engraving test. For the cutting test, we are testing with the 48 watt mode and trying 10% to 100% power and 1 to 10 millimeters per second speed. We're only doing one pass for this test. As you can see, our cleaner results are really towards the lower power, something in the range of 20% and 8 to 10 millimeters per second. MDF usually engraves very well due to its homogeneous nature. Unlike wood or plywood where there's variation in color and hardness, MDF is the same all throughout. This makes for a really nice surface to engrave. Here are our engraving and cut results. For engraving, we have a lot to work with. Our cleanest engraving is somewhere between the lower powered range at 20 to 40% and a speed of 107 to 103. Let's first try cutting. We are doing a somewhat intricate Celtic knot design. The goal here is to have a circle cut out along with the design. Although it only takes a few seconds in YouTube time, in real life it does take a few minutes to complete this process. So when you look at all this tests, take that into consideration. Looks like we're making pretty good progress. The test of fire will be when we take out the cutout. We are expecting them to easily detach. As you can see, we were partially successful. We were expecting the design pieces to easily dislodge after cutting, but we are seeing some of the pieces are still attached. We might want to consider one more pass to get a full cutout. Now let's try engraving the design. As you can see, this is the same design, but the goal is to engrave it. This design on MDF turned out beautifully, very clean and sharp. We will also engrave a photo so you can get an idea of the color variations we can achieve on this material. This photo engraving, we can showcase the intricate details we can achieve with this machine. Now let's try cutting and engraving on 1/4-inch plywood. Again, we are using the 48-watt mode. For cutting this plywood, we were successful on settings from 70 to 100% power and 10 millimeters per second at one pass. Let's move on to our engraving test. For engraving, we got our best results around 20 to 30% power and 107 to 105 millimeters per second. As you can see, we did get a bit of scorching on the higher power settings, so we'll avoid those for engraving this material. Let's try cutting out our Celtic knot design first and then engraving it. From what we can see here, cutting of that design looks very promising. Let's move on to our engraving and come back for a closer look. And here's our finished product. Let's take a look. For our cutting test, we want to make sure that we cut the material but don't actually burn it. So it makes sense to use the settings where you can cut through the material, but you're not using the highest power possible. You can see from our engraving test here that generally we want to have a little bit higher speed. Our cutout came out pretty good, but not perfect. Most importantly, we were able to successfully detach all the cutout parts. Let's see what we can do with 10 millimeter cork. First, we'll try an engraving test. We won't do a cutting test. This material is generally not great for cutting and notorious for catching fire when you do try. On the higher power, lower speed settings, we are getting some burning, so we'll steer away from those settings. Instead, we'll use somewhere in the range of 10 to 20% power and 100 to 200 millimeters per second. Let's try engraving our Celtic knot design. Although this material is very sensitive, the X40 Max was able to handle it. And as you can see, we had some pretty clean results. Now let's see what the X40 Max can do in 38 millimeter redwood. This is about 1.5 inches. Can it actually cut the wood? We'll run this test using the recommended settings. We were able to cut through this 38 millimeter solid redwood with no problem. Now let's try 3 millimeter black acrylic. First, we ran a cutting test. In this case, we had to run 2 tests to find the best settings for this type of material. There are many times where we'll have to do a couple of tests in order to get the settings right. And although this might take a lot of time, it's totally worth it. This way, you won't waste whole sheets of material to find out the settings you chose were incorrect. For our cutout, we will use something around 30% power and 1 millimeter per second in just one pass. We should be able to cut our design this way. For engraving, we only had to run one test. In this case, we can engrave around 10% power and 42 millimeters per second. It's interesting to note the color and texture variations you can achieve with this material, from white and smooth to gray and rough. We'll take a closer look in just 1 minute. Let's try our Celtic knot cutout. As you can see, this one is coming along pretty well. So much so that the cutout pieces are just falling off. For the most part, this is what we want to see in our cutout designs. Now let's engrave our Celtic knot before taking a closer look. Here you can see the results of our cutout test. These are the results for our cutout test. At some of the higher power, lower speed settings, you can actually see some burning of the material. We also experienced something similar with our engraving results. At the higher power, lower speed settings, we experienced melting. But as far as engraving, we had a lot of room to work with, and our Celtic design came out near perfect. We were definitely happy with our cutout results as well. Let's move on to 1.5 millimeters anodized aluminum sheet. For this material, we'll only try an engraving test. You can see that we are getting some great results in every setting. Also, we're not experiencing any warping of the material, which is always great news. Now, let's try engraving our design. Again, this material is super easy to work with. Let's take a closer look at our results. This is basically what we would like to see with every material. Everything engraves well and the designs turn out perfect. Now let's try another metal. This is 0.5 millimeter stainless steel. We will only be doing an engraving test on this material as well. We enjoy working with this material because it yields some very nice color variations that we can work onto our designs. We got some pretty nice color variation ranging from light blue to almost purple to white. So there's a lot of room for colorful designs on this material. We will now try engraving our Celtic knot design. As you can see, the result was perfect and we were able to capture a light blue hue. For our next test, we'll use 1.5 millimeter leather. For our engraving test, we tried 20 to 100% power and 100 to 200 millimeters per second and one pass. As you can see, we were successful at marking on all settings, ranging from light marks to deep engravings on the higher power, lower speed side. We can use these settings for a lot of personalized leather goods. In this case, let's make our Celtic knot into a keyring charm. And here's our result. The X40 Max had no problem with leather. Again, very good results, clean and exact. Next, we'll try 1.5 millimeter rubber using the recommended settings. We were somewhat expecting this material to melt, but it actually turned out exceptionally well. This material can be used for things like rubber stamps. And this is our biggest and final test. For this test, we'll be engraving a game board onto 1/2-inch birch plywood. We'll first do a few engraving tests to get the settings just right, then we'll begin engraving the game board. This is meant to be a large rustic world map. Throughout this process, we were crossing our fingers that nothing goes wrong and thinking happy thoughts. We wanted to showcase what you can do with this machine at a large scale. If you're trying to scale your business, this might be a good option. You can also ramp up your production by making multiple items at once. And depending on the materials that you're currently using or planning to use, the Atomstack X40 Max might be a better alternative, lower maintenance, lower cost alternative than a CO2 machine. And here's our completed game board. You can see that the engraving captures all the intricate details on the map and on the ships. We were absolutely thrilled with the performance of this laser. You can see all the intricate details that we were able to capture. Both the engraving and cutout went really well and we did not experience any errors. Are you ready to get your Atomstack X40 Max? Before you make up your mind, let's go over our test results. Let's start with our 1/4-inch plywood. We were very happy with the results of our engraving. For the cutting, we did pretty good, although there's some alignment issue with the design here. We'll have to fine-tune the settings, but it looks promising. Let's take a look at our 1/4-inch MDF. We had mixed results with this material. On the cutting side, we weren't able to find the settings to make a clean cutout. For engraving, we had a wide range of settings that we could use. Both our Celtic knot design and our picture engraving came out exceptionally well. Our cutout, however, needed a bit more refining. Now let's take a look at our 10mm cork. As you can see here, on the higher power, lower speed settings, we get some burning of this material, which is pretty typical. So we picked settings in the lower power, higher speed to get a clean Celtic knot engraving, as you can see here. Let's take a look at our 3mm black acrylic. For this material, we did have to attempt the cutting test a couple of times to get the settings just right. Here you can see from the underside, we were able to determine which settings actually cut through and which ones did not. We were definitely glad we did. Our Celtic knot cutout turned out perfect, as well as our engraving. Let's take a closer look at our 1.5mm anodized aluminum sheet. This material did very well. We were able to mark all the settings that we tested. This is a great material for engraving because you can see the high contrast of the material versus the material when it's engraved. Our 0.5mm stainless steel was one of the most interesting materials to engrave. Not only because we were able to engrave in multiple settings, but because we get this variation in color. In the end, our Celtic knot turned out a very nice blue color. Next, we'll take a look at our 1.5mm leather. Our Celtic knot keychain pendant came out exceptionally well. And here's our final and biggest test so far. This is our 1/2-inch birch plywood. And it really does open a whole world of possibilities having these large scale jobs, or even increase production exponentially. Let us know what you think in the comments. We'll be reviewing this and other amazing technology in our upcoming videos. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow.